Hello, good evening. My name is Vanessa Norwood and I'm Creative Director of the Building Centre and co-curator with Simona Valeriani, Harriet Jennings and Matilde Savary of Shaping Space Architectural Models Revealed. This event is part of the Shaping Space Architectural Models in Context project, funded by the AHRC and led by the V&A and the Building Centre. This evening, I'm joined by Graham Byrne of Studio MUTT Architects in conversation with curator Dr. Lucia Savi and V&A's Head of Design, Evonne Mackenzie, on design and collaboration for the Bags Inside Out exhibition at the V&A. The model is a powerful tool. Unpacking Bags, this evening's talk, will reveal design and the curation processes behind a major exhibition currently on show at the V&A to show how the 1 to 50 working model served the curators as a way of understanding the gallery space in 3 dimensions, helping develop a suitable backdrop for the precious collection of bags on display. The talk will investigate the role of design in ensuring sustainability of a temporary exhibition with a focus on reuse and repurposing. So it's a great honor to introduce the speakers tonight. I'm going to hand you over to Simona, who is going to say a very quick word, and then we will get started with the talk. Thanks, everybody. Hi, Simona. Simona, you're on mute, which is such a sort of Zoom thing that we've all know, the muted speaker. Hi, Simona, welcome.
The muted speaker, exactly. Hello. It's such a joy to be here with all of you, and thank you, Graham, Lucia and Evonne, for agreeing to being with us this evening and have this kind of multi-focused and multi-voice meeting this evening. As Vanessa said, this is part of the project that the V&A and the Building Centre are running together, and therefore I am delighted to have both Evonne, who is our head of design at the V&A, and Lucia, who used to be at the V&A, has now moved to POCHE.
Zoom is not going well for Simona. She has frozen.
How the V&A collaborates.
You're freezing slightly, Simona, I'm afraid.
Oh, anyway, I leave the floor to Lucia to start us up, talking to us a little bit about the curatorial brief for the exhibition, and I'll disappear from the screen and move to another room where I might have better connection for later.
Thanks, Simona. Welcome, Lucia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa and Simona. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you just tell me if it's going full? Can you see the screen now?
Perfect.
Fantastic. So good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, Simona and Vanessa, to inviting me for your kind introduction and to inviting me tonight. It's really great to see Graham and Evonne and all of the participants. And I'm going to use the next 10 minutes I have to really give you behind the scene look at the curatorial work for the exhibition Bags Inside Out, which is on at the V&A until 16th of January. So if you haven't seen it, you still have a bit of time. The exhibition explored the function, status, and craftsmanship of bags from all over the world, from the 16th century till today. So it's really a big scope. And on display, you have seen, or you will see, around 300 objects, varying in scale, from tiny purses held on the fingertips to luxurious, quite voluminous travel trunks, and is arranged in 3 sections: function and utility, status and identity, and design and making. I will do a step back to think about some of the processes and how I got to this type of exhibition narrative. And I think the best way is to start from the beginning. And the beginning started back in September 2018. I can't believe it. It was so long ago. The exhibition was meant to open before, just when the pandemic started. And so in September 2018, I started working on this exhibition. And the first thing I did was to go to see how many bags and what bags the V&A collection had at the time. And at the time, the collection was stored at Blythe House in Olympia in West London. The collection now in the process of being moved. And there I had the pleasure of spending probably the best weeks of my life, opening drawers and looking at the fashion collection, firstly, the textile collection, but also the Asian collection that was stored there at the time. And it was really amazing to open drawers after drawers after drawers and to look at these amazing objects. And I had the luxury of time, which was really great. So I could kind of fiddle with each of the bags. And this is one of my earliest discovery was a late 19th century, quite unassuming leather handbag, which I spent some time trying to open. It took me a while to understand the mechanism, and then I managed to figure it out that it had two pockets. You see on the left, there was a note inside, and on the other hand, you have actually what we're displaying in the exhibition, which is the kind of sewing kit and different tools inside, and actually nothing is missing there. Maybe, yeah, this was before conservation, so it's quite of an early picture. So it's really great for me to have that moment of spending time with the object. And I'm telling you this because this idea of inside out, of course, it's really crucial to the exhibition title, to the exhibition narrative. And what was also very interesting was what I found inside some of these bags. And it's amazing what you can find inside bags, even though in their museum collection. So I have, notes, pictures, combs, even makeup. You see on the right, that's early me trying to take a picture of the makeup there, of the Cartier vanity case. So it's been really, really interesting spending time with this object, looking at the outside, at the inside, at the surface, at the content, at the function. And after the survey ended, after several weeks, I don't want to say months, but we could determine that the V&A holds in their collection around 2,000 bags. And this is not only from the collection I just mentioned, but also the other collection, which I'll tell you in a minute, which is really extraordinary. It's a crazy amount of bags. What is really interesting also is that to know that every single V&A department, from the old names, the departments now have changed. I'm going to tell you the old names from when I was there. All of them have bags in them. So from textile, fashion, and furniture to word and image, the Asian department, metalwork, Museum of Childhood, DAD, all of them have at least one bag. And just you have some examples here. An example from the metalwork department on the left is a tiny, so this big vanity case by La Cloche, about 1926, but also in the middle, a paper carrier bag designed by Barbara Kruger in the word and image department, and on the right, a shoulder bag, a Burmese shoulder bag from the Asian department. So really a great variety of shapes, form, colors, materials, which was really, really interesting for us. But although the V&A has so many bags, they were, not anymore, but they were often understudied, and many of the bags in the collection never been on display, and sometimes not even catalogued, which is extraordinary. And what makes this lack of attention even more surprising is that bags play a very crucial role in the business of many fashion houses nowadays. They're actually driving many of the sales. So while I was surveying the object in the collection, I was also busy putting together the narrative, the story that I wanted to tell with the exhibition. And what was clear from the very beginning is that I did not want to have a chronological exhibition. I was not interested in a survey of changing shapes and form throughout history, but I wanted to draw attention to the double nature of this object. They are very private because they protect our most personal belongings, and but at the same time, they're very public object that everybody can see when we're walking down the street, and they become status symbols that are carried around to show who we are and who we aspire to be. So putting together the narrative was also very useful as a base to write the design brief for the designer who we wanted to appoint to work on this exhibition. And I reread the brief just yesterday, and it was great to see that many of the ideas that were putting together in the brief, they kind of stayed on and they're still valid, which is really important, I think, for an exhibition. And they're still there, which is great. And one of the main points was to think about this object as everyday companions for virtually everybody, from models on the catwalk with milk carton shaped bags, as you see on the screen, to politicians of the likes of Winston Churchill with these red dispatch boxes, but also civilian carrying gas mask bag during World War II, or travelers and their luggage. And despite the variety and complexity, when we hear the word bags, we almost immediately and exclusively associate them with women. And we tend to focus especially on handbags. But with this exhibition, I really wanted what I really wanted to do, it was to, and I think it was clear in the brief, I wanted to go beyond these general assumptions and understand what makes this accessory so loved, ubiquitous, and universal. And so with this show, I wanted to explore the function, symbolic meaning, design, and making in their many incarnation, from handbags, of course, but also briefcases, backpacks, vanity cases, luggage, wallets, and even military bags. And this is because I believed in order to understand the power and success of handbags in today's fashion world, we need to look at their history, their significance around the world. So this is just to give you an idea of some of the initial thoughts and the research on the exhibition up to the point when we wrote the design brief. And I just wanted to just say some of the keywords I found in the design brief were luxury versus function, inside versus outside, private versus public, everyday versus unique, which was really, it was really nice to see these words again. And I know that Graham will talk more about the models and the gallery on display and the exhibition, but also when we were talking about tonight, we realized that we work with a little other model as well. I'll show you quickly because I know I have just a few minutes left. And actually was very useful for us to work with that model. I'll just show you. So at the beginning of the exhibition, there were two objects I really wanted to display in a kind of an introductory section. And this, you see them on the screen. And on the left is a pair of ties on pockets, 18th century. And on the right is a chatelaine. These were both objects worn by women, a different time, of course, as I said, 18th century, 19th century. But this is how you normally see them displayed in museum collections. So quite flat. You don't see the presence of the body. But for me, it was very important from the very beginning. I wanted to show these objects on the body and how they would have been worn. And the ties and pockets were worn underneath layer of garments. You couldn't really see them. And the chatelaine, on the other hand, was very visible. So we started a conversation very early on with the conservators in the V&A Textile Studio and the designers, Graham, and the curatorial team. And the amazing conservator and mound maker came up, our colleagues, Gil came up with this amazing little model. You see here, it's a miniaturized version of a mannequin. This is a very initial idea. So how can we display these yellow pockets on the body and also show how they would have been worn underneath their garments. And on the right, you see an intervention of Graham and Studio MUTT layering colors in, trying to experiment with different colors. And they came up with this idea of having a hole as well, showing the pockets underneath their garments. And this is the final two mannequins and how they were beautifully produced for the exhibition. So it was really an amazing process to go through and have that model there and for us to be able to talk, because sometimes curators have these ideas, they were all in my head, but I didn't know how to express them, how to work with them and how to make them happen. And so that model really helped us drive in the conversation. And so just to give you another maybe food for thoughts for later. This is how I conclude my presentation for tonight, and I'll pass over to Graham, I think, and I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Okay, am I going now then? Great. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that full screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yes. Great. Okay then, so hi everybody. My name's Graham. I'm one of the original 3 directors of MUTT. We are an architecture practice working in Liverpool. However, we have work all over the world, and we work across a range of projects, including arts and culture, placemaking, and kind of urban regeneration. However, what I'll be speaking about here is about bags and how we went from an initial working brief into a award nominated high quality exhibition. So we were originally invited in early 2019 to respond to what was actually a really amazing brief. So very clear, really concise, way better than most briefs we get in all of our other projects. And what we were really interested in here is when we really think about bags and this kind of dual identity of them, we can think of them as being incredibly public and really symbolic, yet also really private, really personal things. And I think these images here really sell that. You've got the Hermes bag on this left-hand side, which is really symbolic, worth about £25,000. And then we're showing it here as an X-ray. And also the red briefcase as well is like truly symbolic. However, it's also loaded full of paperwork. And we translated that into an exhibition which has two really different worlds. Left-hand side here is the lower level, which is intimate and is a kind of inward facing thing, which is lined in richly colored fabrics, almost as if you're kind of inside of a bag. The right-hand side is then moving upstairs, which is outward facing and really symbolic. And we've imagined it as a kind of miniature cityscape. So these are our really early drawings, which were exploring our ways in which we could articulate these individual worlds. And also all of these images up on this top left-hand side were about one of the real challenges of having large existing cases with actually quite small objects within them. And we were really thinking about ways in which we could really clearly allow visitors to really focus on things. So moving on from that, we worked on this over the course of about 12 or 13 months, and it's truly collaborative process, and a range of other people involved in it as well. And right at its heart was this large model, which is a working model, went through about 2 or 3 versions of it, and it was with us at kind of every single meeting. And we use working models in most of our projects as a way of clearly explaining ideas and as a way of using it internally as a very useful tool. So one of the challenges, an existing plan, which is kind of all over the place and a little bit odd. So we looked at working with this kind of oddness and embracing it. So move number 1 is add in walls, which makes a series of rooms. And each of our walls is made from a stretched screen printed fabric, which allows us that kind of layering of color, layering of pattern. And again, there's our model. Within cabinets, then lining those, allowing people to really focus in on objects and restricting the overall view. And again, even larger models used here. I think these models here are at 1 to 10 scale. And then each of our cabinets kind of has its own individual narrative going on. So these bags here are about handling money, and we've imagined them on a kind of archival drawer in a bank vault. And then when you really zoom out, what you have is this really odd POCHE plan, which when you zoom out even further is reminiscent of the wider museum plan. And within that, it allows us to locate important items in a way we could draw people through it. And there's a model. Moving up is then where you leave this world of being inside of a bag, and we explore ideas about how we can look at public facing and really symbolic things as well. So there's another animation. And what we had here were these large existing cabinets. So each of those red boxes is roughly 2 meters wide and 6 meters long. And most of our bags are 150 mil, they're kind of handbag sizes. And we imagine it here as this miniature cityscape. And each of our existing cabinets was reclad like one of the existing buildings in which handbags are made. So one of them is a kind of Parisian fashion house. And here we were looking at remixing and sampling like hardware, using tools in a way as a kind of an ornament on a building, and then making openings in that which would house one or a number of objects. And one of them is an anonymous factory. And again, here, using things like hardware, using tools as really flat and applied layers of ornament on it. And again, even bigger models here as a way of exploring windows, exploring ideas of overall composition. And here are some photographs of how that works out. And we'd imagined all of our visitors would kind of wander through this. However, as a result of COVID, there's loads of arrows down on the floor, which isn't great. And then finally, the maker's table is a hands-on element, which is about the processes of making bags. So right the way from early ideas all the way to hardware, prototypes, leather patterns, etc. And with this object, we reused an existing table, which was in a previous exhibition. And it's roughly 9.5 meters long, really challenging in a physical sense. And we redecorated that, amended it, and included this high level rail, which allowed us to really express this language of workshop and of warehouse. And you get this amazing thing where it's incredibly tactile and really hands-on. However, again, as a result of COVID, you can probably just about see them there. We have these yellow labels on it that says no touching. So as an overall process here, and in conclusion, this is our working model here at the end of stage 3, and here's how it ended up. And that's me. Thank you. Over to Evonne.
Yeah, we're going to do it. Thank you both so much, Graham and Lucia. We're now going to hand over to Evonne, who is the head of design at the V&A. Over to you, Evonne. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I'm just going to talk a little bit about the kind of two sides of it that we come at the show from. But I think what's quite interesting in the museum context in terms of model making specifically is that often, I think, particularly in architectural projects, the people who are commissioning work are people who are developers or, you know, the people that you communicate with are often professionals working in the kind of design and build sector. And the museum is quite different. in that often you're working with curators who have loads of specialist knowledge, but who might not be particularly used to reading drawings, reading plans, and kind of looking at construction information. And I think that kind of model making in the context of the museum is particularly useful as a sort of discussion and communication tool for people who are the kind of lay people toward that sort of thing. And so I think one thing that was really nice about the kind of model process and the kind of iterative process around the model in bags is that the different types of model serve different purposes at different points of communication, and at no point is the model really like just a sales tool. It's really a kind of explanatory and kind of functioning model device, which I think is quite interesting. But I thought I would just talk a little bit about how the kind of the two sides. So in my role, I do kind of two things. One is kind of commissioning of designers, working with curators and exhibition colleagues to find and appoint people like Graham. And then the other side is running the kind of in-house design studio of architects and graphic designers. And so this project looks at kind of both of those aspects. So I'm not actually sharing my own screen, so Harriet, if you could jump on, and that would be really helpful. So yeah, just I guess to talk a little bit about what we hope to do with design generally at the V&A. I think lots of museums do, and lots of gallery spaces do, kind of fairly simple, have a fairly simple approach to design where the kind of content is king, but definitely in the V&A we're often looking at kind of concept and narrative-led approaches to design. So here we've got a couple of examples of an exhibition called Food, where this particular section that you look at right now is conceptually designed around the intestine. This is a section of the food exhibition that looks at the waste element of the food cycle. And if you go to the next slide, whereas kind of move into another section, and here we're kind of looking at farming and agriculture, and thus the kind of the space starts to shift and kind of lend itself to that. And I think with bags and with other exhibitions, you can really see where the kind of design narrative and design relationship is in dialogue with the curatorial narrative. I think that's quite specific here at the V&A, and was definitely something we were looking for when commissioning. If you can go to the next one, and the next one again. So kind of, I guess, world building. So these are both from Alice, and we're often looking to try and have this complete experience in the shows that we're doing, and that's a sort of fairly multifaceted aspect of here, for example, projection mapping worked into a space that also has objects and also has film content. So it's a bit like that. Go to the next one. And then, and I guess the kind of last two things, so if you want to keep moving to the next couple slides, we're always going to be something quite specific. So for example, with this, you know, the show that you do for kimono is not the same show that you do for Alice, or the same show that you do for bags. And so we're always looking for kind of diversity of approach and kind of different ways of working. And then last but not least, there should be two more. And this is a show that's open right now, and I guess Graham touched on this, but one of the key things which is ever more important is kind of sustainability. And so if you keep going to the next slides. So just to briefly touch on, I think we talked a bit about the brief and the kind of commissioning process. If you go to the next slide. And the next one. So we work, obviously Studio MUTT Architects, but we work with a whole range of different types of designers in the museum. And this is kind of part of the process of, and it's really interesting to see that different design disciplines work in different ways. So you know, with architects or set designers, theatre designers, for example, sometimes work almost exclusively in models for a significant part of their design development. Whereas, you know, so kind of model making is, I think, a really different practice across different types of designers that we work with. And from an architecture perspective, that might be 3D modeling as well as physical modeling. And so yeah, there's always a kind of different ways of approaches from different practitioners. If you remember to the next slide. And I guess part of what we're looking for. So that sort of diversity of kind of concept, diversity of ideas, and diversity of approach, and diversity of practitioners is kind of, we are a museum of design, and thus we shouldn't be doing one type of design in our kind of exhibitions, and we're always looking to kind of represent design in the work that we do as well as in the work that we show. So like this is just a sort of a couple of images of people that we've worked with just since I joined the museum in the past 3 years, and that includes kind of set, architecture, theatre, a kind of real mix. Go to the next one, and then the next one. And so I guess, and I guess what's quite particular in bags, and which is something that we're trying to do more and more internally, is combining in-house and external designers. So obviously Graham was the lead architect, so we commissioned Graham as the kind of client, but then members of my team were kind of graphic sub-consultants to the lead architect. So there's a kind of like multifaceted and kind of collaborative relationship there. So similarly with the Tim Walker show, which was kind of led by Shona Heath, was graphic design by our team internally. If you keep moving the slides on. So yeah, you can see, and these are two kind of elements that are always really intertwined. And there's a really sort of in-depth relationship between the 3D and the 2D work in the exhibition. If you keep going, we keep going again, and then we'll also kind of take that out into the world graphically. If you keep going again, and so we're doing this on another show right now, which is, no one's seen this yet. This is a show that's going to open in February. And again, this is where we've got architecture in-house and graphic design externally, and we start to see that collaboration in the kind of reverse of the bags setup. And then if you keep going, and the next one. And so on bags, I just had a couple of images that I wanted to show, which I sort of, I think I think everyone would say that we had a really enjoyable time collaborating on bags. Sometimes you get projects that just have like good energy, and bags, I think, was definitely one of those. Everyone was really kind of additive in that everyone's ideas were really kind of supportive of everyone's work. So I think it was a really nice process to be part of. If you can go to the next slide. And this picture for me, I think, really sums it up. So this is a picture of Heather, who is the graphic designer who's the lead on the show, and Graham looking at samples for the kind of title signage. And this is where the typography selections of Heather and the kind of scaling of graphic information intersects with the 3D fabrication and build of a show. And I think, yeah, perfect. Keep going. And you know, whether you're making kind of panels or labels, there's always this kind of real relationship between the two, just like you would have with M&E in a building, or kind of lighting coordination, things like that. And I think the model is the one really interesting bit, and I think when you get to sampling is the kind of next most interesting bit in the project, where things start to come off the page and become really real for people. And so I think that's a sort of the extension of the model, is when you start to kind of get the one-to-one scale kind of stuff on the go. If you keep going, there should be just a couple more images of the final thing. And that's it. That was me. Sorry, that was a bit stuttered.
That was really interesting. Thank you. Great to see so many pictures of all your brilliant exhibitions at the V&A. Thank you to Graham and Lucia. I wanted to ask you about the wonderful model that we have in our Shaping Space show, actually, and find out more about when it appeared in the design process, because that model looks quite complete. And in fact, when you go to see the wonderful exhibition at the V&A, it's, for us, a strangely scaled up version of the model. The model seems to be so entirely its own thing. So I was interested, you know, when that model, is that quite sort of near to the end, that model?
I would say it was relatively early, actually. We work in our office using large format models on almost all of our projects, and we use them as a way of working out ideas. It's a real working tool rather than the the kind of the traditional way of handling a model, which is like, we've already drawn it, here's your like £10,000 hand carved one, and it's just about marketing and it's a sales pitch. We use it as a working process. And I think with bags, I would say it emerged at the end of Workstage 2. So if anybody here isn't an architect, Workstage 2 is when you're in the process of really firming up your overall concept and the kind of look and feel of it, which is roughly about 20% to 1/3 of the way in your overall project process. And I think, yeah, one of the really interesting things about it, we think, is when you edit it, when you rebuild parts of it, you can often read all of its history in a model. Most of our models are handmade. We're really limited to using things like 1mm card, layers of paper, and when you kind of remove parts of that, you'll often read kind of traces of what it used to be previously, and it has that memory to it.
I mean, Lucia, it must have been, sounds like a wonderful process working with Studio MUTT and with Graham. That first model as well of the human figure and the amazing tie-on pockets, why aren't they available anymore? I would love some tie-on pockets.
I'm really hoping they will come back.
It's time for a resurgence of interest in tie-on pockets, definitely. So that model was earlier in the process, it sounded like, and how does that then kind of influence your curatorial thinking?
I cannot recall exactly when was, I mean, Graham was already on board, so it must have been maybe roughly this, maybe a bit earlier than the model the Studio MUTT produced, but it was early in the process because that's the only way it could have happened. So when these ideas, takes a while to produce these ideas, of course, in a museum environment, I mean, for any environment. So for me, I try to explain what my vision was. I had an idea in my head, you know, I would like this two object to be somehow on a mock-up mannequin, not a real dress. And I didn't know what material we could use. I didn't know. At one point I thought, you know, can it be, you know, plastic? Can it be transparent material? Can it be, I was throwing ideas out to the conservation colleagues and to Graham. I think he came on board a bit later when we already started a bit talking. And I think that model, after the first meeting, we didn't even ask Jill to make it, but she came up and showed us, oh, this is how I envisage it. And that's how you really start the conversation, because then you can talk about, oh, yes, this works, this doesn't work. What about we add a color? So I really think it was a way of moving on from my brain, my ideas, and trying then to make it happen. And that was really amazing, because then even, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, but even you guys that never really dealt with conservation material, with mannequins and that kind of problematics. There are some there's no problematics, but you know, it's an historical object. It's an 18th century tie-on pocket that needs to be held on a mannequin in a safe way in a museum environment, and needs to be also accurate. All the layers you see then, they're historically accurate. So it had a lot of, it needed to do a lot. This mannequin needed to do a lot. And I think the model really helped us having those conversations. And then with the Studio MUTT intervention with the colors, I think they've done an amazing job in terms of not only the colors, but also the idea of the whole and all those conversations. I think it was a way of really allowing us to be creative with ideas, because we had it there and then. Also, probably is because I need to see things in person in order to discuss it. Graham knows, I need to see the colors, I need to see, and the model even of the gallery really helped me as well understand what they had in mind. And to the point of Evonne, I'm one of those curators. I can read drawings, but I just don't get excited by it. So if I see a model, then I'm like, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. That we can we do this? Can we move? So it was a matter of allowing the conversation and to be all part of the discussion. I think for me, both models.
And it is a particularly exciting model, isn't it? This one. Which brings me on to a question by a member of the audience. Rebecca asks, Graham, who makes your models? Do you use a model maker or are you making them in the studio?
We all make them. We've only got 5 people in our office at the moment, and yeah, we all do them. So loads of paper cuts, loads of injuries.
Model-related injuries.
Yeah. We all do, and I also think it is really important that everyone in our office is hands-on with it as well. Like I mentioned, it is a working tool. I've worked in places previously where it's like, you're an architect, you only work on architecting, you do drawings, reports and so on, and then we have a model shop of 10 or 12 people who will then just make models for you. I think that hands-on process is really fundamental to how we work as a practice.
Yes, and that's exactly what we're trying to celebrate in our Shaping Space exhibition. So yes, everyone must come and see it at the Building Centre and realise the power of the model. So Evonne, it sounds like part of your job is negotiating with a kind of wide team of people with different expertise. Is that where the model is useful as a tool for not only for explanation but for negotiation?
I think it's not so much negotiation as it is. I guess it's hard to really describe like Lucia can read drawings, for example, but some people really you can send them a drawing and say, can you check this? Can you check everything's okay here? Can you check the object's fit? Can you check everything's gonna be all right? And they'll literally be like, yeah, sure. Because, and you know for a fact that they genuinely can't read it and they don't know what they're looking at. And so I think the model is really important from a point of view of comprehension and understanding, more than it's like that sort of, I've also worked places where the flashy model gets pulled out to wow the client and sell the idea. And I think it's definitely not doing that. Like it's like, that's not that big. Oh, okay, that's like, you'll take a photo of inside the model and be like, oh, okay, that's what I'm gonna look at. That's what the visitor is gonna see. Oh, okay. It's really, they're really useful. Yeah, and they can be just bits of printed paper. They could, like, I think a lot of people are used to working with pre-existing material in the museum context. So you can pick up an object and you can see how big it is, you can know how old it is, you can know everything about that object. But the process of designing is like, we don't know what it is yet because we haven't finished the task. And the model can really help people take that like leap with you of like, it can help build confidence and understanding. And so it's not really so much like a negotiation tool, I don't think, but it's undeniably useful. I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear what Graham, if that sounds true to you too, but.
Yes, Graham and Lucia, does that sound right? So not so much, so more of a kind of revelatory implement then, maybe something that really, I mean, I think you only have to look at your model, Graham, and the kind of relationships between, the sort of the space and the design becomes really clear, but also very magical. There's something undeniably magical about that model in particular.
Oh, thanks. It's all really complimentary, this. I think, yeah, the kind of revelatory part of it is really important. And I guess as we work along projects, work across a number of models, so using larger models for looking at things in a little bit more detail, or even larger models if it's a case of we weren't planning on rendering anything, using models as a way of making drawings is also really useful, as well as you can handle light in a really simple way. Like you go outside and you say, here is daylight, and you photograph it. And yeah, we've worked on a few projects where we've handed over models at like 1 to 20 scale or something. And then when it's finished, we've had clients who have gone, you know what, it looks just like a model. And on one hand, that's a result of the projects that we work on, which are often very flat, really colorful, using graphics in an interesting way. And also it's a result of that process of really having a client on board. And then when things are finished, it isn't this really big surprise anymore, as it's just what they were always expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Lucia, can you confirm that that was what you were always expecting?
Yeah, no, I have to say the model has been really an amazing tool for us. And it spins. You saw it in the animation. For me, it was like an amazing, it was very heavy, I have to say, when we had to move it from room to room. Not the most practical thing. We had to really lift it. But it was really, really, really good to be able to discuss details. And as you say, Graham, there was no surprises at the end. That's what we were getting. I think I really appreciate as well the evolution. Things, I mean, seeing the early model remind me of some of the earliest ideas and some of the things that were changed, some of the things that stayed, and it's been really an amazing way to allow conversations, to allow for me to be one of those persons. Okay, this is that big, is that space this, because yes, I can read drawings, but on the other hand, when you see it 3D, for me, that's when it does the trick. And also playing with this colors and the idea that you can peer inside. And it's not only the model that you have in the exhibition, but Graham showed others when you blow up some sections, and just show as well, there was amazing little paper handbags as well in some of the cases, where you can really see how we're gonna then place the object. So for me, it was really, definitely this idea of not having a surprise at the end. I never thought, and I didn't see the build for many months. The exhibition was built, and then I went in many months later because of COVID. And I did, of course, was surprised to see how beautiful it was, but also it was exactly how I always saw it in that model. Even the colors I wasn't so sure about, but at the end they were perfect. So, I always, there was one green that we always discuss. And I think it was great at the end we chose that green, but there were endless discussion about the greens, and I asked as well to have a large piece of what was that, plywood or whatever, painted in green to see it. This is how much I cannot visualize until I see it, but I think it's really important for curators, especially when they're working with a new space or new ideas, to have that moment of, let's mock it up, let's see how it works, because otherwise it's just a leap of faith. And I think what you were saying, Evonne, this idea of not be so scared to approve things on paper and have it with the model, gives as well us from the curatorial team, who has to just say, yes, of course, let's go with it. You feel much more confident that things are going to end up looking that way. So definitely super useful. I don't know how I'm going to work without a model ever again.
Well, so another question from a member of the audience, Andrea, asked, did you feel confident in handling the model? Was it something that you could manipulate? Were you allowed to fiddle with the model?
Were we allowed, Graham? I think so. It was always in our offices. So we were because he lived in two different, yeah, sure. It was like a cake. It was like a wedding cake. Just had to take it off. I never really, glue things on or touch it. It was more about asking the guys, can we then change this color? And I never cut and paste, never touch it, Graham, don't worry. It was more for them probably to play. For us, it was, I didn't have that hands-on, but I didn't need the hands-on. I had my object to play with. There was Graham's toy, I think. But I don't know if other members of the team have played with it. I don't know, Evonne, did you guys play with it?
We not so much play with it so much as like it was component based, and so there was things in it that were intentionally adjustable and movable. particularly upstairs where things could, and the plan of upstairs in the end is quite different from the plan initially. And that's something where they were free, they weren't fixed position items. And so, yeah, there was the opportunity to move like bits of furniture and cases, and the model was made to be movable. It was part of its intent, right? And there, you could switch a bit out. So, you know, you change the entrance and it's a triangular component that you could, you know, substitute in a like for like update. So yeah, it was definitely, I mean, and we definitely repaired little bits when things became unglued when everyone had clearly been handling it too much. But apart from that, yeah, I think it was more that it was made for use, not for admiring. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And maybe actually that's a very brilliant note to end on, a model made for use. And although it wasn't made for admiring, it is very beautiful. So I would urge everyone to come along and see it as part of the Shaping Space exhibition with the V&A here at the Building Centre. So I want to extend a big thank you to all of you speakers for coming along tonight and meeting up in this virtual space of Zoom. Look forward to seeing you all in real life soon. So thanks to Graham Byrne, to Lucia Savi and to Evonne Mackenzie, and thanks to my co-curator, Simona Valeriani. Thanks to Harriet Jennings for organising and controlling us all via Zoom. So yeah, good evening and thank you so much. Come and see the show. Good evening, good night.